Thank you very much, Councillor Collier-Cart. For the last few years, every time I start a set of public remarks, I do so by reminding people of the land we're on. And I start with that basic greeting that is so common to so many different Indigenous peoples. In the Tsuut'ina language, Dada Nastada. In the Stoney Nakoda language, Amba Watich. For the Métis people, you might say Boujou or Tanshi. And in Blackfoot, Tanshi I just learned is Cree, that has been merged into Michif. And in Blackfoot, I often say Okinitsugua Nestido Wanoka Bestotis. Greetings to all my relations. I'm the one that the Blackfoot people call that Bestotis. And by the way, Blackfoot is extremely difficult to pronounce. It means clan leader, he who makes camp and the others follow. And earlier this year, when I was gifted this beautiful jacket and these moccasins that I'm wearing by the Starlight family, our brothers and sisters in the Tsuut'ina Nation also gave me a name. Etia, always ready, which I hasten to remind you is not, in fact, always prompt. That said, the reason I like those greetings is because I love that symbolism where you say greetings to all my relations. Because indeed in community we are all related. And we stand here today on very ancient land. On land where for thousands of years people have been coming to this place called Mokitstis, the elbow, the confluence of two great rivers, to hunt and fish, to live and love, to trade, to have great victories, to taste bitter disappointment, but above all, to build community. And starting my speeches by reminding people of that may seem like a simple gesture. It may seem like a small symbol. But gestures are important, and symbols are important. And they bring us together in community in very important ways. Near the confluence of those two great rivers is a bridge, the Lanjamin Bridge. It is at that place where people have been meeting for thousands of years. And as you all know, we stand at a unique point in history. We stand at a point in history in this nation, which is a point of reconciliation. A time of reconciliation, a time when we're forging new relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians, and we're doing so with the guidance and recommendation of elders, of knowledge keepers, and informed by the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The TRC's final report summary points to principles adopted by the United Nations, which outline the duty that the state has to remember. It says, a people's knowledge of the history of its oppression is part of its heritage, and as such must be preserved by appropriate measures in fulfillment of the state's duty to remember. On a collective basis, symbolic measures intended to provide moral reparation, such as formal public recognition by a state of its responsibility, or official declarations aimed at restoring victims' dignity, including commemorative ceremonies, the naming of public thoroughfares, I know why I wanted to read that, or the erection of monuments to help discharge that duty of remembrance. As you all know, the Aboriginal Urban Affairs Committee of the City of Calgary, our committee, wrote the wonderful White Goose Flying Report, which this council endorsed unanimously not so long ago. It's a beautiful report. It tells stories that we don't know about our own history, about our own past, and it very, very practically talks about how to move forward. It's beautifully written. I encourage every Calgarian to read it. And as you know, among the many recommendations made in that report, CALEC suggested that for the City of Calgary to consider renaming the bridge to a name that signifies building communities rather than dismantling them is a powerful symbol of mutual respect for our future. So let's talk about the Lanjamin Bridge. The Lanjamin Bridge, as you know, was named for Sir Hector Louis Lanjamin, who was the Minister of Public Works at the time, who authorized the funding for the first bridge's construction in 1888. Lanjamin was a father of Confederation. He was almost certainly the first federal cabinet minister to ever visit the town of Calgary at the time, and that's pretty much his link to the city. There's absolutely no doubt Monsieur Lanjamin played a very important role in who made significant contributions to this nation in its early years and to the growth of this nation. But Mr. Langeman was also part of a government that played a foundational role in the establishment of the residential school system. Indeed, he is one of the few who was named in the Truth and Commission report as being one of the architects of the system. There's a lot of historical context around that. And nobody, I think, would ever suggest that anybody at that time was acting out of malice or bad will or evil in their heart. And certainly Mr. Langeman was a very progressive thinker in many, many ways. But it's important for us to recognize that having been named in the TRC report, what impact his name has on others in our community. Renaming this bridge is not about vilifying one person for our nation's history. It's not about washing out our past or refusing to tell stories about our past. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about acknowledging that history is complicated. That history is complex, and for us to truly grapple with our history, to understand our history, means looking at the good and looking at the bad. And it means really forcing ourselves to think about that. It's funny because my friend Harry Sanders, Harry the historian, sent me a note today with an editorial from the Calgary Albertan, now the Calgary Sun, 100 years ago yesterday. So almost 100 years to the day. And the Albertan at that point argued that the name of the Langeman Bridge should be changed. It was actually in the context, by the way, of a proposal to name the then brand new Centre Street Bridge after the mayor of the time. So I may resurrect that proposal a little bit later. But they actually talked quite eloquently in that editorial about the naming of bridges in Calgary. The Louise Bridge, for example, named after, no, I thought it was, actually named after the daughter of one of the people who lived in Kensington. True. I thought it was named after Princess Louise Caroline Alberta as well. And in fact, even in that day, they were saying the links that Mr. Langeman has to our community and the fact that the bridge, which exists today, is not actually the original Langeman Bridge. It's not the one he funded, because that bridge was taken down and replaced twice since. And that was really the argument that they were making. You named the first one after him because he signed the check. But this is actually not even that bridge. That said, as my friend Harry Sanders, Harry the historian, often says, history is not static. This moment in time where we stand today, at this moment of reconciliation, is no less significant than the moment that bridge was built. We're also standing at a point of our time in history today that deserves to be talked about, that deserves to be part of the history of those that come after. The important thing about the proposal that's before you today is that it's intended to start a conversation. You know, we were often asked, well, if you're going to rename it, what would you rename it? Do you want to rename it after an Indigenous leader? Do you want to rename it with an Indigenous word? And we talked a lot about this, and I thought to myself, of the tens of thousands of motorists and pedestrians who drive on Crowchild Trail, or Sarcee Trail, or Shagnappy Trail, or Pegad Trail, or Deerfoot Trail, how many of them, or Stony Trail, I could keep going. How many of them stop and think, well, what's the meaning of the name of this street? They really don't. And that is why the word, or the title, Reconciliation Bridge, was so carefully chosen. Because the title is in and of itself meant to spark a conversation. Not one that whitewashes our history. In fact, one of the key elements of this notice of motion is that, in fact, we acknowledge and celebrate the history, and we interpret the history on either end of the bridge, and we continue to talk about it as part of a process of reconciliation. The TRC summary states, quote, reshaping national history is a public process, one that happens through discussion, sharing, and commemoration. As Canadians gather in public spaces to share their memories, beliefs, and ideas about the past with others, our collective understanding of the present and of the future is formed. And I believe that the symbolism of changing this name is the perfect way to continue the discussion in our community, in our entire community, about reconciliation. So, I want to say that I'm really, really grateful for everyone who has participated in this conversation. I'm grateful for the leadership of many of my colleagues around this table, many members of council, I'm grateful for the Calgary Aboriginal Advisory Committee. I'm grateful for the Treaty 7 traditional knowledge keepers who've helped to shape this idea. I'm grateful for Harry Sanders for providing us with historical context and background in all of this. But I'm mostly grateful, and I'm mostly thankful that as a community, as a nation, in this 150th birthday of Canada year, in the year that marks the 140th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 7 at Blackfoot Crossing just east of here, making us all treaty people, we're at a point in time where we're not only willing to have this conversation, we know how important it is to have this conversation. It's not about erasing the past, but it's about building the future. You all know, if you know me at all, that I am a deeply proud Canadian, that the power of this nation echoes in every blood cell in my body every single day. But that also allows me to recognize that we're not a perfect nation, that we are the nation of Komagatumaru, that we're the nation of the Chinese head tax, that we are the nation of Japanese internment camps, and above all, we're the nation that fostered, propagated, and nurtured residential schools, where thousands of children lost their lives, where thousands of children were taken from their families. But I'm also deeply proud that we live in a country where we can have the conversation, where we can move on together, and as we said, when we declared 2 years ago a year of reconciliation for the city of Calgary, we can forge a common path of prosperity together. And I urge all of you to support us in this symbolic change. The first question is coming to that question of intent. I'll even be more generous than Councillor Chabot and say I won't even, it's not that I'll try to presuppose intent, I will assume the intent was good. I can start with that assumption, understanding a little bit of history, understanding the reading, and understanding a little bit about Mr. Langevin. But that doesn't erase what happened. As we heard from Councillor Pincott, the final residential school closed in 1997. This is not ancient history. This is history that impacts our Indigenous brothers and sisters every single day. And I have no doubt that Monsieur Langevin was a good man, that he believed powerfully in the idea of this nation, that he worked hard to create this nation and build it from nothing. But I also, like Councillor Carra, think that he'd smile at this conversation and say this is exactly what he was trying to create. A nation where we can tell our stories, a nation where we can change our stories, a nation where we were always striving to be more inclusive of everyone. So you've heard me say many, many, many times that I don't believe in slippery slopes. But I actually think that this slope is not so slippery, because it is actually the power of who we are as Canadians, that we confront the Komagatumaru, and we confront the Japanese internment, and we confront the Chinese head tax, and we move together as a community. And I think that's incredibly important for us to do together as a community with all of our brothers and sisters in this place. As to Councillor Putman's question, the plaques are just the beginning. The idea of calling this thing Reconciliation Bridge is because it's about that ongoing process of reconciliation. Councillor Carra never fails to remind me that there is a very underused public space on the north side of that bridge that he would love to see called Reconciliation Park. We'll talk about naming, but it is certainly a space where we can do even more interpretation about our Indigenous roots and history in this place. Folks, sometimes conversations like this feel really hard. They feel really difficult. But sometimes they're really easy. It's really easy to do the right thing. It's a simple change. I sweated for the longest time, or should I start council meetings with an acknowledgement of traditional land? What's that mean? What will people think if I do that? And I just did it. This stuff can be very easy. It can be simple to do the right thing. Final two things that I'll say is that there's a reason that we're talking about a bridge today. Because bridges are deeply symbolic in Indigenous and non-Indigenous cultures. Crossing water is about taking the journey to your fellow person. It's about walking to your fellow human being and joining your fellow human being. And that's why it's so important that what we're talking about today is a bridge. One of the reasons that I am so proud of this nation, especially in this broken world of ours today, in a world where the forces that would divide us seem to be prevailing over the forces that would bring us together, is that that doesn't happen here. That we fight every single day for that promise of our community. That promise that every single person who lives here, regardless of what they look like or where they come from or how they worship or whom they love, that every single person in our community has the opportunity right here, right now, to live a great Canadian life. We've not fulfilled that opportunity for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And taking this symbolic step today helps all of us build that community of promise, that community of prosperity, and that community above all of opportunity. And I hope that all of us.
So, Your Worship, before you close, for those watching, maybe you just outline the actions that you're asking Council to approve today.
Sure. So, if you pass this today, Council, what will happen is that you will have renamed the bridge. So there's some technical things around our municipal naming policy, which is the second, therefore be it resolved. You will have renamed the bridge. But what's exciting and important is what comes after that, which is we'll continue the process working with Treaty 7 knowledge keepers, COWAC, the Calgary Heritage Authority, and making sure we develop interpretive language that tells the full history. That says, look, there's a reason we named this bridge after Hector Louis, right? And there's a reason that in 2017 we decided to change the name. And this is why we're having that conversation. So the animation, the whole piece of that would be very important. And then I hope that to mark the 140th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 7 and the 150th birthday of this great nation, that in 2017 we'll have a proper rededication ceremony. It'll be, I guarantee you, the most moving thing you've ever seen. And I hope that we will have the opportunity to do that together.